Welcome back, class 9, to the online bio classes. We had already completed chapter 3 and now we are going to start with the fourth chapter, pollination and fertilization. You may have heard the word pollination, which comes from the word pollens. What is pollination? It is the transfer of pollen grains. Pollen grains are the male reproductive cells, that is the male gametes of the flower, which is produced in anther of a flower. And anther is present in a stamen, and the stamens together they are called enricium, or the male part of the flower. So pollination is the transfer of pollen grains or the pollens, we can say, from the anther, that is the male part of the flower, to the stigma, which is the female part of the flower. This transfer of pollen is very important, or this pollination is important for the plants, because without pollination there will be no fertilization, and if no fertilization means formation of fruit and seeds will not be there. Okay, so generally the plants carry out pollination naturally on their own, but there are some agents. Agents means the one which help in the process of transfer of those pollens from one flower to the other. These agents are in the form of wind, water, or in the form of animals also. Like human beings can also bring about pollination, that is called artificial pollination. So we find that pollination helps to carry the male gamete to the female part of the flower, so that it can meet with the female gamete to bring about fertilization. Now we find generally the pollens are carried by the animals or the birds or the insects, and it happens accidentally. Accidentally means by mistake. They are not going intentionally to bring about this pollination, but it happens accidentally. For example, if any insect will sit on a flower because it is being attracted towards that flower, maybe due to the scent of the flower, due to the color of the flower, or in order to feed the nectar, which is a sweet liquid produced at the base of the petals. So insects or the birds like hummingbird, they are visiting the flower in order to get that nectar. So while they sit on that flower to get the nectar, the pollens, which are sticky in nature, powder-like substance, they will stick to their body, and when the same insect or the bird or the same animal will go to the other flower, it will dust off those pollens on the surface of stigma, accidentally, not knowingly. Unknowingly it will happen, and that will bring about pollination. So you know that some plants, they do not produce any flowers. Then how the pollination is carried out in them? Like mosses and ferns, they reproduce with the help of tiny or microscopic structures which are called spores. And these cone-bearing plants like pine or spruce trees, they reproduce by pollens which is produced in the male cone, and that pollens from the male cone is carried or transferred to the female cone with the help of wind. So wind helps to bring about pollination in the cone-bearing plants like spruce. Okay. Now next, what is the types of pollination? So before writing pollination, definition is transfer of pollens from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Anther is the male part of the flower. Is called pollination. I am not writing that. You can understand that transfer of pollen grains or pollens from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. Now this pollination can occur. Now next we have to study types of pollination. There are generally two types of pollination. What are they? Self-pollination and cross-pollination. Okay. The two types of pollination are there. Self-pollination, and the number two is cross-pollination. Now self-pollination means only one plant is there. Within one plant that pollination takes place. And here in cross-pollination, there are two plants which are needed or required for this process to be done. Two plants are needed for cross-pollination. Now this self-pollination is further of two types. What are they? It is also known as autogamy and geitonogamy. The two types of self-pollination are autogamy and geitonogamy. In your book the spelling may be different, geitonogamy. In the book there may be T-O-N-O-G-Y, but this one is also okay, geitonogamy. This O if you write, geitonogamy it is, okay. Now what is the meaning of autogamy? Autogamy means, first let's start with this one and then we'll study all the definitions. Self-pollination means, like if this is a plant, here is one flower, within this flower this is the stamen and this is the stigma part. So if transfer of pollen occurs from stamen to stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. Or if the flower is burned in some other part of the plant and here is the stigma, and now pollens from this flower is transferred to the stigma of this flower in between two different flowers burned on the same plant, that is also called self-pollination. So auto means self, gamy means marriage. So if pollination occurs within a flower, like the first one which I said, that pollens are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, one flower is only there, that is called autogamy. But the second example which I gave, that when the pollens are transferred from the anther to the stigma of another flower born on the same plant, that is called geitonogamy. So definition of self-pollination is transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower born on the same plant is called self-pollination. Whereas cross-pollination is also known as allogamy, the other name. And in cross-pollination, two different plants are there. Like this one is one plant bearing one of the flower, another plant bearing another flower here. So from here the anther, here is the stigma. So from this flower the anthers are transferred, the pollens are transferred to the stigma of another flower. So this process is called cross-pollination. Understood? Cross-pollination means in which two different plants are there. In both of them, there is transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. What we have to learn is, in self-pollination only one plant is there, in cross-pollination two different plants are there. Okay? So cross-pollination occurs between two plants of the same species. Same species means both are mango, both are guava, not different plant. Like one mango, one guava is not possible to bring about self-pollination. Now, next we have to study in your syllabus is, what are the adaptations for self-pollination? Adaptations means what changes are produced in the flower that helps to bring about self-pollination only. First point which is there is homogamy. The meaning of homo is the stamens and carpels. Stamens are the male part of the flower, carpel is the female part of the flower. So when stamens and carpels, both of them mature at the same time. Mature means before doing pollination or fertilization, the male and female part of the flower must grow, mature means become old enough to be able to bring about pollination and fertilization. Okay? So dichogamy means, or homogamy means, the condition in which the anthers and the stigma, that is the male part of the flower, which is known as stamen, and the female part, that is carpel, must mature at the same time, that is called homogamy. Examples are wheat, potato and rice. In wheat, potato and rice, you will find that male part, that is the stamen of the flower, and the female part, that is carpels, both of them mature at the same time. Okay? Now second condition which is given is cleistogamy. Cleistogamy is a condition in which the flowers do not open at all. Okay? The flowers remain closed, they will not open. Then how the pollination will be done in such flowers? that do not open. So clastogamous flowers are the flowers in which generally they open after maturation. Anther and stigma is exposed to the environment after their maturation. But some flowers, they do not open even at maturity. They are called clastogamous flowers. So if you have to write the definition of clastogamous flower, flowers that do not open after maturity. So I will write it here. Clastogamous flower. If asked define what is clastogamous flowers, flowers that do not open after maturity. Flowers that do not open after maturity. Even after maturity are called clastogamous flowers. An example of such flowers, they are, because they are not opening, so their anthers and stigma, that is the male and the female part, is not exposed to the environment or to the surrounding. It means the pollens from outside will not get deposited on the stigma of such flowers, clastogamous flowers. So it means they are forced to undergo self-pollination only. Cross-pollination can never occur, because if a flower will not open, if it is covered or not opening only, then pollens from outside can never land on the stigma of that flower. It means within that flower the pollens can be transferred on the stigma. That will increase the process of self-pollination and it will reduce the chances of cross-pollination. Means there will be no cross-pollination in clastogamous flowers. Example is Khatibuti and wood sorrel, the two flowers which are mentioned, where clastogamous flowers are found. In those two plants, the name is wood sorrel and Khatibuti. Okay. Now next we have advantages of self-pollination. What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages of self-pollination? Means what benefits we get from self-pollination, advantages and disadvantages. Okay, that you can learn, write in your copy also, because it is asked in the examination. At least 3 points you must learn. First advantage is, now since the flower pollens are deposited within a flower, like within a flower, this is the anther, this one is the stigma. So since the pollens are deposited from one part of the flower, that is from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, so there is less wastage of pollen grains, is quite economical. The flowers need not be large, colorful, showy or attractive, because they don't need to attract any insects, because even by the slight wind or jerk also the pollens may fall from the anther and get deposited on the stigma. So it is economical. It will help in the preservation of parental characters, because since new pollens from outside are not coming, so same genetic constitution of the parent plant will be maintained generation after generation. Okay. Then next, there is less chances of wastage of pollen grains, because the pollen grains are easily transferred within the same flower without traveling from one place to the other. And next point we can say, pollinating agents like wind, water, insects, they are not required in case of this one, self-pollination. So in a book already the points are there. Number 1, first point mentioned is self-pollination preserves parental characters. How it is possible? How the self-pollination will help to advantages of self-pollination? I have not written that. Advantages of self-pollination. Only the main points I will explain. Preserves parental characters. Preserve parental characters. Parental characters. How? Because within the same flower, pollination is carried out of a single parent. So whatever characters of the parents are there, they will remain intact. Intact means they will remain inside that plant. No new characters from outside will be coming there for hybridization to bring about new appearance of characters and all. Okay. Then number 2, it ensures seed production, because self-pollination is certain or it is fixed that from the anther of the flower, the stigma will be, that pollens will be transferred to the stigma of the same flower, so it will help in seed formation. Seed formation occurs after fertilization is done. The ovule will change into seed. So seed formation is sure. Third point is there is little wastage of pollen grain. So less wastage of pollens. Already I explained this one, that pollens, no need of any wastage of pollens. Why? Because if pollens are traveling from one place to the other, from one plant to the other, then chances are there they may get wasted while being carried by wind or water. But here there is no chances of wastage of any pollen grains. And the last point that already I said, the flowers need not be large, showy, attractive and colorful. So flowers are not large, brightly colored, showy, attractive. They do not need to produce nectar because there are no insects going to visit these flowers for bringing about pollination. Okay? So there are 4 advantages of self-pollination. Number 1, preserve parental characters, means the parent generation, whatever characters are there, they are preserved. Number 2, seed formation, less wastage of pollens, and flowers need not be showy, attractive, large, and they need not be scented or produce nectar. Nectariferous means they do not need to produce any nectar to attract the insects. Now next we have the disadvantages of self-pollination. What are the disadvantages or the harm of self-pollination? First disadvantage is the plant will become weak due to continuous self-pollination. Okay? Because it will not last for a long time. If the parent plant was sick, suffering from any disease, the same disease will be transferred to the baby plants generation after generation. It will lead to the weakening of the variety. No new varieties will be produced, and due to continuous self-pollination, no useful characters can be introduced in the hybrid or in the race. There will be less chances of adaptation for such plants because they are not undergoing cross-pollination, so it will not help them to survive in the changing environment, less adapted to the changing environment. And they are weaker or defective characters of the parent, that is sick characters or disease of the parents will be transferred to their babies, and immunity towards the disease will fall after some time. Means such plants which are continuously produced by self-pollination, they will be less resistant to diseases. Means they are more prone to disease. Means they will suffer from the diseases more as compared to the plants which grow by cross-pollination. Okay? Got it? Now next we have to do the cross-pollination. Okay, so next we have cross-pollination. Already I said the definition. Cross-pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther of a flower present in one plant to the stigma of a flower present on another plant. Means 2 different plants are involved. In cross-pollination, 2 plants are required. Now next we have to study is what are the adaptations for cross-pollination. Okay? So because of cross-pollination, healthy plants are found growing, or the plants become healthy, they are more adapted in their surroundings. So what are the adaptations for cross-pollination? Definition already I said. Adaptations for cross-pollination are, means what makes the plants in nature. It is said that nature favors cross-pollination. That is also called contrivances for cross-pollination. Contrivances means what are the points which can prove that nature helps in the process of cross-pollination, not in self-pollination. So first point is adaptations for cross-pollination. Unisexuality. I will just explain the terms, I will not write. Unisexuality of flower means if a flower contains only one, either male or the female part. They are called unisexual flowers. Like male flowers containing only stamen are called staminate flowers. The female flower containing only pistils are called pistillate flower. So if a flower is either male or female, it cannot undergo self-pollination, because for self-pollination to occur, the flower must be bisexual and it should contain both the stamens as well as the carpels. Okay, got it? Now second one is dichogamy. You should understand all these terms as well as you should be able to define them. Di means two, dichogamy means marriage. So different timing of maturation of anthers, that is stamens, and carpels or pistils is called dichogamy. Means different time at which the male and the female part of the flower will mature is called dichogamy. So here I write in short, different timing of maturation of male and female flowers or parts of the flower is called dichogamy. In your book also definition given. The condition when stamens and carpels of a bisexual flower mature at different times. So different timing for maturation of male and female parts of the flower. Male part is called the stamen and the female part is known as carpel. So you can make your own definition also and write different time during which male, that is the stamen, and the female, that is the carpel, parts of the flower mature is called dichogamy. Now suppose if in a bisexual flower, if the stamen matures before the carpels, such flowers are called staminate flower. So if asked what is staminate flower, I should say that word. Staminate means the male flowers are called staminate. There are two words, that is protandry and protogyny. In your book also given protandry and protogyny. Protandry and protogyny. Protogyny. So what are the meanings of these two terms? Pro means first, andry means andrecium. So you can understand the meaning is such a bisexual flower in which stamen matures before carpel is called protoandry or protandry, and protogyny means proto means first, gyny means the female part of the flower, that is carpel or pistil matures before stamens. Means the female part will be matured first and the stamen or the male part is not matured first. So if both are not matured first, it will not help to bring about pollination. Okay? So it is one of the advantages for cross-pollination that a flower is there in which the stamen is mature but carpel is not mature. It means they have to depend on the other flower to get those pollens. Similarly, if the carpel is mature earlier, that is the female part is ready, but the male part is not ready in that flower, it means they have to depend on the pollens from other flowers. Okay? Now next we have self-sterility. The word self-sterility means unable to reproduce. It means although a bisexual flower is there, but the male pollens are unable to bring about fertilization with the ovule, that is the female part of the flower. It means that particular flower is sterilized to its own pollen grains. It will not bring about pollination and fertilization. Example, in passion flower, then comes hercogamy. What is the meaning of hercogamy? In some flowers, there is a barrier. Suppose here is the flower, a barrier is there. That can be with the help of mechanical barrier. Barrier means a covering, a hood-like covering is there. It can be in the form of petals of the flower that will hide the male and the female part of the flower. It means male and female part will not come in contact with they cannot undergo self-pollination. Why? Because of this mechanical barrier. Male part is here and the female part is somewhere here. Okay? So it means due to this mechanical barrier, the male and female part cannot come in contact with each other. It means the pollens can never come in contact with the stigma of that flower. It means they have to depend on the pollens from other flowers. So this is also a condition which favors cross-pollination. The next condition is heterostyle. Heterostyle means, style is the stalk of the flower. Is called style. Like we have the stigma, we have the style, and then we have the ovary. So if the styles are of different length, heterostyle means flowers of 2 or 3 forms with anthers and stigma at different levels. Suppose anther is here in a flower and the stigma is here on the top. Now can it help to transfer the pollens from down to up? No. Due to different length in the stalk of the anther, this is called filament, this one is called style. So since they are of different length, it cannot help to carry the pollen from the male part to the female part. That is called heterostyle. So it is convenient for pollination between stamens and styles of the same length. Example, in oxalis and primrose. Like if both of them are of the same length, like I will draw here, one anther is there, one stigma is there. See, same length is there, means easily the transfer of pollen can take place. But in this case, different length of the stalks are there, so that is called heterostyle. It prevents self-pollination, so for that cross-pollination is easier. Okay. Now what are the advantages of cross-pollination? First advantage, the offsprings which are produced by this method, they are healthy and they are more healthy. Why? Due to mixing of genetic characters, because 2 different plants, their genes will mix up when the pollens from one plant and coming in contact with the female gamete, that is the egg cell, both of them different genes, different characters, they will combine and it will bring about formation of new characters. Number 2, the cross-pollination yield never falls below average, means the production of grains and all, it will always increase due to cross-pollination. It will never decrease. New varieties can be produced by introduction of useful characters. Weaker and the defective characters can be easily eliminated by cross-pollination. Like you can avoid pollinating the plant by selecting only the healthy plants to make them more strong. And the last one, the organism show a number of variations which helps them to increase their adaptability to the environment. Means because of cross-pollination, such plants can be grown which can easily survive in the changing environment. Okay. Now what are the disadvantages of cross-pollination? Number 1, for cross-pollination, the flowers need to be very large, attractive, showy, they need to produce nectar, and they need to be brightly colored in order to attract the insects. Number 2, it is not always reliable, means we cannot 100% depend on it. It may not become sure, like in self-pollination it is sure that pollination will occur. But in cross-pollination, if there is no agents to bring those pollens, it will not take place. Third one, due to cross-pollination, sometimes very good characters of the race are eliminated or they become diluted. And the fourth point, some undesirable characters may creep. May creep means it can enter inside the offsprings. And the last point, that is disadvantage of cross-pollination, is it is an uneconomical process because it results in the wastage of pollen grains. So next we have the differences between self and cross-pollination. You can write it like for self-pollination, only one plant is required. For cross-pollination, 2 plants are needed. In self-pollination, the pollens are deposited from anther to stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. In cross-pollination, the pollens are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower born on 2 different plants. There is large wastage of pollen grains in cross-pollination. In self-pollination, there is no wastage of pollen grains. For cross-pollination to occur, there need to be some pollinating agents who can carry those pollens like wind, water, or animals, insects, or birds. For self-pollination, pollinating agents are not required. Self-pollination is economical, cross-pollination is uneconomical process. Okay? Self-pollination preserves the parental characters, whereas cross-pollination will not preserve all the parental characters. And many more points are there. You can write in your copy as homework, and after watching this video you can like and comment your name in the comment section. In the next class we can continue with the other topics like what are the different adaptations, types of pollination, and then fertilization, fruit and seed. Okay, thank you.